you, Mariah. Go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, so I'm Mariah Lewis. I am a registered dietitian in Ann Arbor, Michigan, working in the private practice setting, mainly with clients with eating disorders.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And like I just explained a little bit ago, the purpose of this video and the purpose of the series is to really just have a conversation about with clinicians and people who have recovered, to kind of like a little informal interview style to gather a little bit from you and your story of, what was one of the most powerful pieces in your recovery. What was something in your recovery, when you think back to it, that helped you grow in your relationship with food and body the most? Something that stands out so that someone else who may be watching this might take some inspiration, or it might just spark something or plant a seed for them. So what would you say that thing was?
Yeah, so the biggest thing for me was kind of dropping the idea of perfection. Perfectionism was a big key in kind of helping my eating disorder maintain itself inside me, and just kind of coming to the realization that perfectionism isn't attainable, and perfectionism is kind of this ever moving target that really cannot be reached, and it's constantly changing and constantly evolving, and so you're constantly reaching for that perfection that's never really going to be able to grab it fully. And so being able to kind of let go of that and let go of that idea that was attainable was huge for me. It was a process, but it was definitely huge in my recovery and really getting to a true state of full recovery.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like that is something that many people struggling with disordered eating and eating disorders face, and have that common, could have that common characteristic of wanting to attain this perfect way of eating, this perfect, and just in general, having that perfectionism tendency. And I'm curious, I have a few questions for you, because I know you said it was a process, which of course, changing that mentality. So I'm curious first, do you know what sparked that for you, of like, oh, I don't need to, follow this agenda of, being perfect, quote unquote?
So in my recovery, journaling was actually a really helpful thing for me. And that was one of the big, I don't know if you call it an activity or a thing that helped me really kind of realize my thinking patterns, and realizing that the things that I was thinking in my mind and putting them down on paper or saying them out loud, it just kind of made me realize the irrational nature of them. And the irrational nature of like these things that I'm striving for in my mind, I don't think I could ever attain those. And the pressure that I was putting on myself for trying to attain those things was wreaking havoc and causing chaos in my life. And so for me, journaling was actually the thing that really helped me realize how those things weren't attainable. And so being able to kind of look at my thought patterning over that time of journaling and kind of seeing how it was progressing by working with my treatment team really kind of helped me realize the thoughts that I had prior were really unhealthy for me and weren't attainable at that time.
Yeah, that's great. I think journaling's fantastic. And I also, it sounds like through journaling and through conversation with your treatment team, you were able to just, I guess, dig a little bit and build more awareness, and without understanding how, that you do have these perfectionistic tendencies, and that how that plays into your eating disorder, you can't start to change it or start to, understand, how that is keeping you stuck necessarily. So that's great. I'm curious, that would be that was probably a hard process. Can you tell us a little bit about what that process looked like? Because I think it's fantastic, like this idea out there for people, like, okay, let's notice that, but how also understanding and verbalizing that's going to be hard work. That's really hard to just let go of that. So what did you find helpful, and what was hard about that process?
Yeah. So, one of the key things that I felt like was just taking things small and realizing that recovery in itself didn't have to be perfect. I think that was kind of a a way that my perfectionism held on is it was like, okay, well, now I can do recovery perfect.
Hmm.
And I can keep all of my control and doing everything perfect step by step with my recovery.
Yeah.
And so I think kind of taking things small and looking at how when I felt like I wasn't doing recovery perfectly, how I could use that to my advantage. And use those times where I felt like I was quote unquote failing in my recovery, to really look and learn from that experience. And so the key was kind of looking and taking things kind of incrementally and taking things really small steps at a time and trying to find ways that I could challenge some of those perfectionist ways that I had and those perfectionist thoughts, which felt really scary, but taking it kind of small in a way where I kind of talk about it with my clients actually of having kind of like, here's your comfort level and this is like your plateau that you're at. And I always try to like take it one step above that where it feels manageable, but it doesn't feel so overwhelming that you're not going to be able to accomplish it. And so I'd like to kind of take it that one step above my comfort level. And so I felt like that was key for me, is just kind of pushing a little bit, but finding my comfort zone in that pushing and that challenging.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's how can we get uncomfortable, but not too uncomfortable where, just where can we comfortably get uncomfortable, is how
Exactly.
I always describe it, if that makes sense. But that
Yeah.
sounds fabulous. There's a lot of things you said there, that I think would be helpful for people to hear. And I totally agree with, as far as, going from this perfectionist tendencies with the eating disorder or with disordered eating, to now we're trying to do perfect, with recovery. I find, a lot of my clients get into that trap as well, of we're trying to reach this end goal,
Hmm.
and we're very focused on the end goal, and we're trying to do everything like figure out everything right now and try to do everything perfectly right now. I think
Hmm.
that's could keep people pretty stuck in that mentality. So you found yourself doing that in your own recovery?
Definitely, definitely. And I think it was really kind of taking some of those times where I was feeling like I was failing or I was drowning in my kind of own perfectionism during that time, and really saying like, okay, if I feel like I can't challenge this full concept right now, what is it that I can do? So I really like to ask that question, like, okay, if I don't feel like I can do X, Y, and Z, is there something smaller I can do, to really kind of fight that drowning feeling and feeling like it's so challenging to try to get over this concept that you've had in your mind as kind of the ideal concept, um, to kind of just ask myself, well, what can I do during this time?
Yeah.
Is there something small I can do to challenge this and still work towards this, even though I don't feel like I can go 100% right now?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think, thinking of that end goal and holding so tightly to that end goal of, recovery, we miss a lot of things in now,
Hmm.
or we're unable to, see what we can do now. And I really think that acceptance with where we're at in each stage of recovery
Hmm.
is very important, to just, feeling, feeling hopeful in your recovery as well, of like, right now I'm tackling this while I'm holding hope that I'm going to figure this thing out later, having
Hmm.
acceptance along with the way. And I think that, again, that black and white thinking and that, perfectionistic tendencies, can just really keep you stuck. So I think it would be is going to be a super helpful thing for, people to hear, because I think people struggle with that, often, and recovering perfectly. I'm curious for your relationship with, so perfectionism in general is something
Hmm.
that you probably struggled with, I'm assuming. But around food and body, how were you able to navigate through those and let go of those? If you can give a little bit more specifics, or, like,
Hmm.
speak to that a little bit more.
Definitely. So, one big piece for me, kind of related to the food aspect, but also related to my body, was movement. I was really perfectionistic around movement. I was an exercise physiology major in undergrad, so it was like my whole being of undergrad was going through and looking at how exercise affects your body, and really having kind of that kind of unfortunately developed my relationship I had with my body and exercise or movement during that time. Um, and so for me, a key piece of developing a healthier relationship with my body was taking a break from movement, and saying, I need to take a step back And even though it was really scary at that time, because I relied so heavily on that and relied so heavily on that of the kind of perfectionist ideal of what a body should look like, it was very scary for me, but that was a huge key in kind of helping me work through some of those fears, because I felt like it was by continuing to engage in that movement during that time, it was suppressing those fears.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't really allowing me to fully address them head on, because they got suppressed during that time.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, that was huge in actually helping me heal my relationship with my body, and really kind of, it showed me that all of the fears that I had were definitely based in a little bit of the irrational nature of the eating disorder.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
and it's not like all of my fears suddenly came to fruition at that time, by taking that break. And so that was really powerful for me, in my relationship with my body.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that's actually a couple times, I believe, in these interview series already, we touched on this idea of taking a break from movement, just
Hmm.
to, because with this idea that that you're talking about around perfectionism, like even when you're talking about a perfect relationship with exercise, so it's hard to look at that, to take a step back and look at that when we're stuck in it.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think it's important just to take a break and think, okay, well, like you said, what is this perfection? Is this attainable? But also, is this what I want? Is this what's good for me? Is this what the
Hmm.
kind of relationship I want with these things? So kind of questioning, what is, what is this perfectionism, like this strive for that? What is that actually even doing for us? How is that but I think that taking a step back is necessary to be able to look at that from like more of an authentic, clear place with yourself. um,
Definitely.
so that's awesome. Thank you for that little piece. For people watching this, what would you suggest, as far as, so if someone's watching this and saying, yeah, that's me, everything in my life, I feel like I'm striving for this perfect way, and
Hmm.
I think that's really hard to finding, like, what is the way of doing things, like, externally.
Hmm.
What would you suggest for them?
Yeah, so I know you touched on this in one of your other videos with the black and white thinking, but I do think that that's huge in just trying to rework how you're thinking about things, because I think perfectionism, or perfection in general, kind of dichotomizes things. You're either perfect or you're not, or
Yeah.
you're doing good or you're doing bad. And I think really working into that gray space and that gray area in that thinking is huge, and trying to really become, I know we talked about the awareness, is just trying to really become aware of how those thoughts play out in your mind, and saying, am I dichotomizing things? Am I putting it in 2 categories or 3 categories? Is there maybe another way to think about this? And
Mhm.
so I think becoming aware of how your own tendencies tend to come out in your thinking, was huge for me, at least, and being able to kind of push more into that gray area when you're thinking about anything related to recovery.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That makes a ton of sense. And I think that's that black and white thinking can be extremely harmful. And I think, too, the tendency to go there is, I'm in recovery or I'm not in recovery, or I'm doing the recovery thing or I'm not. And
Hmm.
it also leads to the feeling of I'm failing in recovery, rather than kind of taking this mindful, compassionate approach where we're trying not to judge, and we just take a step back, and we're able to look at these behaviors, these relationships, and not think about where necessarily, where we want to go ultimately all the time, but like, with where I'm at, how is this serving me? How is this not
Hmm.
serving me? What is this actually bringing me? So we can get into that gray and into that intuition, rather than these external black and white rules, the eating disorder, or what recovery is supposed to look like, but kind of looking inward, like with that journaling. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Definitely.
Well, thank you so much. That was super helpful. Is there anything you'd like to leave with our viewers before before I let you go here?
I mean, one thing that I always try to get across to my clients is just saying, like, recovery is worth it and full recovery is possible. Because I know it can feel really, like you said, you're kind of in recovery or you're not. But I do think it's a constant process of learning, because it, life changes. But
Mm-hmm.
full recovery is possible, and it is worth it, even though it's really scary and it's uncomfortable, and it's unbelievably hard process, that it's something that's attainable, and it's you're allowed to kind of work through those different stages and feel different ways, and it's getting to that full recovery as possible. So
That's awesome. I think that's a great ending note, because that's just the main thing that I want this to come across for everyone. That is, it is super hard, and you're in the thick of it. And us as clinicians who do this work and so passionate about this work, it is there for you. Through
mm-hmm.
It's very hard, and it's there for you. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for that. I think people
Yes.
will really enjoy listening to this. So thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.